You'll get a boner from the following story, which is that that's come out since. She loved to drive, right? She was a mechanic during World War II, and she loved to tool around in her Jeep. She got the Saudi King Abdullah. She's like, hey, you want to take a little spin on the property? She's like, sure. She got into the driver's seat, and he's, wait, that's not how this works. And there wasn't anybody else, and she just starts ripping, doing donuts in Balmoral, absolutely freaking out the Saudis. So there's your bonus. I think the speech was a bad speech and a missed opportunity. If you think, and I think you think, and I think, that there's a subset of the Republican Party, MAGA Republicans, ultra MAGA, whatever he's calling it, the MAGA force, every day changes, that don't believe in the results of the 2020 election, that are actively trying to elect people like Doug Mastriano in Pennsylvania, but people in secretaries of state in Michigan and other places that are going to engage in chicanery in 2024, then you can focus on that. There's no business in a speech like that to talk about, as Biden did, infrastructure, contraception. Right. That has nothing to do. The thing that you're talking about is a particular set of authoritarian or just kind of cuckoo bananas values. And what you do in that case is say, what can we do to try to insulate ourselves as a country and a society against that? One thing you could do is mention, which he did not do even once in the speech, the Electoral Count Reform Act, bipartisan, introduced by Susan Collins, a Republican, that would basically take off the table all of the novel legal tricks that the Trump team were trying in 2020. Didn't mention it. And Democrats are not bringing it up. They're not bringing that vote up, for the bill up for discussion until after the election. If you really believe democracy is in peril, act like it. Also, I think you work backward from what are the elements of Trump or Trumpism that are beyond the pale? Right? Let's say he lies more than everybody else. He kind of does, right? He encouraged people to. He encouraged people to riot. He disputed the results of an election. There are lies on the Democratic side too. Sometimes, if you think about what are the traits that we don't want to see, then look to yourself and anybody's faction. I'm libertarian with a small L. It's a small little faction. People on that team, too, can engage in this and call it out. There's a lot of election denial in the Democratic Party, depending on if you lose. Stacey Abrams was not a gracious loser in the Georgia race a couple of years ago, and she's revered as a hero on the left, largely. There's a lot of political violence in this country on the left. It's not the same. But it's worth talking about. If those values matter to you, you work back from the value. I mean, you hear that a lot from people who voted for Trump, especially the first time around, is that they don't like the way that the culture sneers at them, that they perceive that the culture, academia or whatever, is sneering at them, and he speaks to them or in their language in some way. That's as much as anything else, people's motivation. But again, I think what you do to it, you don't do a campaign speech, because that's not you said, 41% of people self-identify as independents. I wrote a book about that 10 years ago. It is a big thing. People don't like the partisan scrum. So there are values that you can appeal to everybody on within that. And he didn't. He just today, he tweeted out, we have to fight the ultra MAGA agenda of cutting Social Security. My people, that is a ridiculous thing to say. Donald Trump, in the field of 2015 and 2016, distinguished himself as the Republican laughing at Paul Ryan for wanting to cut Social Security. Donald Trump changed Republican attitudes about cutting Social Security. Ultra MAGA has nothing to do with cutting Social Security, so stop trying to make a normal election out of it. Talk about the abnormal things that Republicans are doing.
Why is there
them off?
The men who are playing, fantasy football now, they have a make-believe football team that they're managing, and they're going to ignore their family for the next 6 months.
Win-win.
What?
It sounds like a win-win. I mean...
yes. Come on.
If we have, I always, my individualism dar starts going off when I hear a lot of big talk about men and women and what they need and what they don't. But I think a big part of it right now is that men just don't work as much as they used to, especially young men, right? Teenagers 20 years ago, more than half of them, 16 and over, worked. Now it's 1/3. That's a big drop-off in 20 years. And every one of the generations afterwards works less as a cohort than they did up until, this is good news for you guys, 55 and older, more share of men work than they did 20 years ago. That's weird. If we're like losing the idea that getting a work ethic, figuring out how to, wake up hungover and show up to work on time, to get the independence of having a hostile third party pay you money to do indifferent work, that's important. And we're not doing that anymore. And that's I think, is worse for masculinity than playing fantasy football. But I would add that there's been two big events over the last few years. One's been commented on, one hasn't. The commented one is COVID. People have worked from home. Their relationship to their job is just different. You found out what you could do did you really need to live close to New York City, or could you move to Nashville? A lot of people kind of shook up the snow globe when it came to that. So that changes their approach. I think some of the data probably is reflecting that as much as it's reflecting anything else. People are just sort of rethinking, where do I live and why? But then the other thing that doesn't get talked about, because we have such stupid politics about immigration in this country, we have choked off immigration, legal immigration in this country over the last 5 years. Both presidents. Donald Trump started very, very hard, especially at the end of his term. Joe Biden has continued quite a lot of it. We don't have enough legal visas. The hardest working sons of bitches in this country all the time are immigrants, and they also create jobs. If you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics of what is the cohort hived off that works the most, Hispanics. Right? We need more Hispanics in this country. It's those people are not going to. If you go down to the Home Depot, you're not going to see Chad and Tyler out in front of there. That's not it, right? We need people who are going to do that and other things.